Who, me? What? Oh, yeah. Okay. All right, I'm here. It's AntiwarRadio. I'm Scott. All right, now's the part of the show where I get to welcome my friend Anthony Gregory. Hey, kid, how's it going?
Hey, Scott, how's it going? How are you doing?
I'm doing great, man. How's things over there? Up there, I guess.
Pretty good. Well, you know, it just, the summer finally started in the last couple of days. It's getting warm, so it's Bay Area weather.
Yeah, it's crazy. I went up there in July last year, and it was 45 degrees out. Very strange thing. Anyway, yeah, it's nothing like that here. Yeah. All right, so anyway, do you guys know who Anthony Gregory is? Hopefully you do. He writes for LewRockwell.com. He's got an article on there today. He's also something or other at the Independent Institute, one of the mucky mucks there. And he's working on a book right now about the writ of habeas corpus. That'll be the best treatment of that subject ever published, I'm certain. And you can also find him at Strike the Root, where he's in... what do they call the guest editor there sometimes, and all kinds of other things like that. You ought to check out AnthonyGregory.com. He's got links to all of the most valuables there. And now, Anthony, your article today on LewRockwell.com is called The Persistence of Red-State Fascism. So, first of all, what's Red-State Fascism? And then what's so persistent about it?
Well, I'm of course biting off of Lew Rockwell with this phrase that he coined in 2004, in identifying just how authoritarian the conservative side of America has become under Bush. And this was, I think you'd agree, this was a pretty seminal article that he wrote because it was really made very clear the line between what conservatives believe in the era of Bush and what we libertarians believe. And the persistence of the red state fascism is just this piece I wrote talking about how horrible it is that even with the election of Obama, although in some ways conservatives are not quite as pro-government and quite as bad as they were at the height of Bush, they're still very bad. And, well, it's kind of just a depressing reflection on how, from a libertarian standpoint, from a pro-peace standpoint, there's not that many people to cheer for other than, you know, some of the more principled writers and activists all over the spectrum, including the libertarians themselves.
Well, you know, it's this wonderful scam they call the two-party system. One party to supposedly represent the liberals, the other the conservatives, and then we can switch them off every 8 or even 4 years if necessary without ever leading to a substantial shift in policy. That's what Carroll Quigley wrote back 10 years before I was born. And that's the way it's been working. And, you know, in the 1990s I saw, and I know you saw too, got started hating government young, both of us did. The right wing in the 1990s, up I'd say through 97, hated the government. They, you know, G. Gordon Liddy and them coined the phrase the jackbooted thugs to describe the ATF, the federal police, law and order enforcer types, right? But it was a right-wing thing to say, no, cops can go too far sometimes. And you know what? Freedom is more important than the state and things like this. And there really was a very populistic, if not very libertarian, but somewhat libertarian kind of rebellion on the right, the Tea Party movement of that era. And of course, you know, the media would only focus on the most extreme elements of that for propaganda's sake or whatever. But then in 1998, they invented the Lewinsky scandal, and it was wonderful. And they said, you know what was wrong with America in the 90s wasn't the national government, it was Bill Clinton. That guy's such a juvenile, and don't you just hate him? And can't you just wait? Don't you think it'll be great when we get some adults in there, and then everything will be fine? We'll bring change to Washington, D.C. And that was the slogan of the Bush team in 2000. And they came in, and now everything was completely different, and all the right-wingers who hated the state became these red state fascists.
Well, that's true. I'd say that certainly they used Clinton all throughout the 90s. There was a tension in the conservative movement. Should we focus on Clinton, the man who was supposedly disgracing the White House, or should we focus on the White House itself and how it was the disgrace? And this was always a tension. I will say that even as late as 98 and 99, there was some radicalism in the conservative movement. In the Kosovo War, there was not nearly the anti-war movement anywhere that there should have been, but I think conservatives, including the politicians, were better on that war than the left liberals, not the radical left, but the milquetoast left. And I specifically remembered, when Columbine happened, it was conservatives who would say something like, well, Clinton's killing this many innocent people every day or more. So instead of focusing on taking away our guns, let's rein in the military. I mean, this was, this is what conservative institutions were saying. They were opposed to nation building, all the rest. I think that even at the very beginning of the Bush administration, the conservative movement was not quite, it wasn't as bad as it became. I think that that the beginning of the Bush administration didn't seem to be on track to be much worse than the Clinton administration. It was just kind of, whatever, average Republican administration. But then 9/11 brought out the worst in the conservative movement, and I fear that the worst of the movement has yet to subside, that they're still like they always are when they think American culture or the American nation state is under attack, and then nothing else matters. We need to worship the state, worship, the military, support the troops, which means sending them to go kill and die in completely immoral wars. This is conservatism, and it always has been conservatism, but certainly it ebbs and flows in terms of how bad it is. And what I lament in the piece today is that it has not improved nearly enough with Obama in power.
Well, and I think one thing that's really happened to the conservative movement is that what passes for intellectualism in the conservative movement now is the American Thinker blog, where
sure, yeah.
That guy's never been right about nothing over there, I don't think, which I haven't read the thing in a long time, but boy, you talk about wallowing in ignorance and hatred and stupidity, and now there is no more William F. Buckley who, tried to set a standard of hey, it's important to, be interested in the history of mankind at all, or something like that.
Sure.
No, now we got Jonah Goldberg running the conservative movement, the intellectual side of it.
Sure, and it's a sad thing that
he's a dummy, that's my point.
I mean, we've talked about Glenn Beck, and I actually think I talk about this in the article, how frightened I was by his big rally this last weekend, but it's sad that in some ways Beck is more intellectual than most movement conservatives, because he at least attempts to talk about history in a somewhat thoughtful way. I'm not, endorsing everything he says, but he at least has the pretense of thinking, all the while saying that he's not an intellectual we should look to. But it's a sad thing that he is what people are drawn to, and that he's not even the worst of it. If you look at, the right-wing press today, what's the big issue? It's still, they're not talking. Once in a while, they talk about how Obama is sending us into calamity and all of this, but they're still obsessed with things like the mosque. I mean, that's one of the biggest issues still is let's stop the mosque. Let's use the force of government to prevent people from praying on private property, which is an affront to everything that this country stands for. That's good. Everything about the American, tradition that's worth preserving.
It might be the last thing that was worth conserving. We'll be right back. It's Anthony Gregory on AntiwarRadio with you guys and me.
You can interact with other LRN listeners on our message board at forum.lrn.fm. That's forum.lrn.fm.